baby. They did it. My man.
Oh, boy.
Everybody, here we go.
Jeffrey, you got to get a second from me, buddy.
That was an aggressive lift like that.
Come on, break the record, Jeff. Oh, this is 10 seconds. 12 seconds. 15 seconds. Go for the record. Oh, my gosh. It's a new record. Let me have the mic. Can I have the mic? So blow, blow, Seminole wind. Blow like you're never gonna blow again.
Well, I'm here. I'm not sure where Corey went. He was supposed to come out here. He's supposed to be here for this big win. The Noles have lost. Oh, it's coming in high.
I made it.
Cheer for a good team again.
Cheers. Go Noles.
Go
Hi guys, nice to see y'all. It's been a long time.
And welcome into Warchant Game Day. Good morning, everybody. I almost said I'm Tom Lang. That would have been funny. I'm Jeff Cameron. He's Tom Lang, and you guys are you, and you're here, and we appreciate that. It is game day. Obviously, Tom and I had to record the pregame show because as this is playing right now, we're at Hotel Indigo. We're shaking hands and kissing babies and having a few perhaps Bloody Marys. I don't know. May need some with the way the season started, Tommy.
Yeah, well, it is build your own Bloody Marys, and it's a build your own bar in general. I don't know how you build your own mimosa other than maybe saying, I would like a splash of juice rather than a healthy helping of juice. Maybe give me a peel of an orange as well. But we're building our owns. The temperatures are pretty balmy and nice, even if it's muggy outside for mid-September. So we're thankful for that. But yeah, it's time to have a build your own win. That's what we're looking for today. Build your own win. How do you want to do it, Mike?
We'll talk about it in a second. Today's pregame show is brought to you by Hotel Indigo Tallahassee College Town. Whether you're a frequent guest, a business hosting your event, or stopping by the restaurant, bar, and rooftop before an FSU home game, Hotel Indigo Tallahassee wants to thank you for your continued support and being part of the family. If you want to host your next event, the best view of Joe Campbell Stadium in all of Tallahassee, call Jay Green, 850-755-9011. That's 850-755-9011. Hotel Indigo Tallahassee, welcome to our neighborhood. We need this neighborhood to be spruced up with a victory. It's not Hotel Indigo's fault. It's not College Town's fault. This is a wonderful setting. This is a place you want to be. But, man, we could use a little charge, a little shot in the arm by the play on the field today. Florida State, as you guys know, bears repeating, 0-2 with 2 conference losses. This is not a conference game. It does look like, however, that the bye week did not bring about massive changes, at least not at the starting quarterback position. DJU will get the nod today, and we'll see throughout the rest of the segment groups what changes are made, or more importantly, Tom, how quickly Mike Norvell chooses to make changes in a game that he simply has to have. Let's not get into the minutia just yet of how Florida State could win this game or lose this game and what Memphis brings to the table, but rather let's talk big picture because Florida State finds themselves in a desperate way, and there is nobody, I mean nobody, even those that thought Florida State might take a big step back this year with the loss of all that NFL talent. Nobody could have imagined that Florida State would begin a season at 0-2 after finishing a season at 13-1. And if you don't count that bowl game because of all the opt-outs, I don't blame you. You can say coming off a 13-0 season, you really didn't expect Florida State to be 0-2. But it's not just that they're 0-2, Tom. It's the way that they've gone 0-2. They've really looked completely discombobulated, at times disinterested. They have not been physical. They've not been able to run the ball at all. In fact, last game, they largely chose not to do it for the entirety of the first half. The quarterback hasn't played well, but he hasn't been helped out by anybody they thought dependable coming out of camp. That included a horrific effort last week from Kyle Morlock. So I'm interested to see what brand of football do we get today? What brand of football does Florida State roll out at noon today against Memphis that can get them a win? I think they have to go back to what they wanted to be before the season started and what they told everybody they would be before the season started. And that is a downhill, running the football, physical bunch, throwing off a play action where you can utilize DJ's big arm down the field with the speed that you brought in. We've really seen none of that through 2 games.
Yeah, it's about, for the players. Did you wake up wanting to be physical today? Did you wake up wanting to play football? And I don't think all of the problems in the first 2 games has been about a lack of will. I think it's guys thinking through some of their assignments, but still, there's a lack of physicality as well. Both can be true. They've been flat. They've looked flat in both games. Do we want to play a little bit more robust today? And then, we talk about this in the offseason as it pertains to the transfer portal, that Mike Norvell will tell you, and the coaching staff will tell you what they think the holes in the roster are based upon how they attack the portal. They think they needed a lot of help this year. If you really want to break it down, you could go position by 17 dudes. They thought they needed essentially an entire recruiting class's worth of talent to be infused into the roster. Well, the same concept applies here. Mike Norvell, we've talked about for the last 2 weeks. What miscalculation was there in the offseason from the head coach, from scouts and media? Like what did he think? Well, that's in the past now. You've lost 2. What did he think after Boston College and before now, over the course of the bye week and over the course of this week? And the personnel that's out there, the formations they run on offense, the players they use on defense, the rotation patterns that they employ today are all indicators of what this coaching staff thought of the first 2 weeks of film. And I'm fascinated. I'm really fascinated to see what his conclusions are now, because we all know that the assumptions were incorrect before the season started, but what's the teach? What did you learn, and what things are you going to lean on today? We can't know until they kick it off, but I do think that today offers an opportunity for that ground game, that ground attack, to shine in a way it hasn't the first 2 games of the season.
I do too, and I think they have to go to it. It's what they're built to do. It's what they engineered their offense to be. They haven't exactly leaned on it just yet. The offensive line has not played well, but they also haven't attempted to be the physical downhill running team that we thought they could be before the season began. They do. I mentioned at the outset, you need a shot in the arm is what I was referencing as we gathered here at Hotel Indigo, and I said that maybe we'll see it today. Well, they get that in the form of Hakeem Williams, who, for all intents and purposes, has basically been announced to be back for this game this afternoon. Listen, that's not nothing, guys. That's not nothing. Hakeem is a big, physical receiver. Not probably. He's your most talented receiver. He has the greatest upside. He's a guy that I think ultimately helps you in the run game because of his blocking. He helps you in the quick game because of his blocking. I think he ends runs physically when he has the ball. I just think he can help change maybe who you are a little bit here today. He can't do it all. Obviously, he's a wide receiver, but I do believe that is a big shot in the arm for them this afternoon, and I'll be curious to see how they try to utilize him. It should be noted, Florida State, I think, was dealt a bad hand early this year. If you think back to spring, Destin Hill was a guy that really would have made a difference with this receiving core. I know we can't cry over spilled milk and we can't wallow in self-pity, but I'm telling you, folks, Destin Hill would have been a dynamic playmaker for this offense. He was having an incredible spring camp when he tore his ACL and is lost for the season. Hopefully his rehab is going well. Seems to be when we get a good look at him at practice. He's a guy that is kind of running around and certainly rehabbing at full force. So next year, maybe he can help you. But, not just that. You lost him, and then right off the bat, you lose Hakeem Williams before you ever tee it up over in Ireland. And that's a tough loss because that's another guy that I think changes who you are, as I just said. So you lost 2 pretty important guys at wide receiver, and you had to hope immediately that some guys that really had never done it for you before and had never been a go-to receiver before, you were hoping that they could step up. So far, really nobody has. I would say Kentron Portier, veteran receiver, has played well when he's had his opportunities. Let's see if they rely heavily on him as well. But this was another bad week where you got the announcement that another dynamic playmaker and Jalen Lucas is lost for the season. Now, he's not a wide receiver, but he could have helped you out in the pass game. He is a guy that could change the scoreboard with his athleticism. So, Florida State needs something good to happen. I sound like a broken record, but they need something good to happen and happen today.
Yeah, for their own confidence's sake, they need to see the ball go through the hoop. I mean, it was almost like the moment that the 2022 team had when they blocked the extra point against LSU. I mean, they found a way. They discovered a way to be in a position to lose that football game because it should have been on ice with 5 minutes to go, and it was not. You needed that break, and that team wasn't perfect. That team lost 3 games, but that was the team that laid the groundwork. A lot of the same players came back to go 13-0 last year, and I don't know if any of that happens without blocking the extra point. Sometimes
sure.
you can whittle it down to one moment. And, of course, this team hasn't had that fortune in the first 2 weeks of the season, but they do need something in the way of confidence because confidence matters even at the professional level. But this is easily, to me, one of those groups that you could tell is searching for itself. It's searching for its own identity, and they're searching for somebody to emerge as a front man. And we hear a lot about leadership, and we hear a lot about heart and culture and all those types of things. Well, aptitude and merit kind of forges the pathway for the leader. Who's going to be that guy? For my money, I think Kentron has done all he can. Like, you don't have a few plays where you say, well, if Kentron caught the ball,
right,
right. Most of the times he's been called upon to go make a play. He has. Okay, that's one in the good column. Kentron he's responded to the challenge from preseason camp where Mike had to pull the receivers aside and said, get it together. Who else has done that? I mean, really? Think about the entirety of the 11 on defense and the rotation of all those guys. Think about the rest of the players on offense. Do you have another one? I mean, Toafili might be that guy. Unfortunately, he has a key drop early against Boston College, but he has 9 carries so far this season, so it can't be him. Is there an offensive lineman you feel like is, kicking butt routinely? No. So, I mean, it ain't DJ. You got to find some more answers. More people have to join Kentron in that column of, hey, he's doing his job pretty well.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that it happens. I do. I think Hakeem could be that guy to join the party here. I think you got to try to get him the ball. I think he's a playmaker. I think he's potentially your best receiver. Let's see if it happens. We haven't seen Jaylen Brown become the guy that we were hoping he could become early in his career at FSU. He's a very young player, but he's got lightning speed. They haven't really been able to exploit that. Obviously, Jakai's Jakai, who can be kind of a role player for you and a gadgety guy. But he's not going to change games all that much as he's certainly not a 1 or a 2, I don't think. So, Benson, you brought in, really never did anything at Alabama. You needed him to do something here. I can't pin it all on him because there's been a lot of things wrong in the passing game. First of all, the offensive line hasn't blocked it up all that well. And obviously there have been a lot of missed throws to boot. So, let's see if it changes today. I think it starts with the run game. I think you got to get that going. And if you do, everything else opens up and becomes so much easier. Maybe you can relax a little bit. You don't have to be threading the needle all the time. When you're unable to run the ball, teams tee off. It doesn't mean they load the box, but they certainly tee off and they have a good sense of what's coming. And that hasn't gone Florida State's way at all. They have not been able to do any of the things that they said they wanted to do coming into this season. So It's got to start today.
No, and you could oversimplify it and say, well, if you don't love the quarterback and you don't love the receivers, then the teams are stacking the box and teeing off against the run. That's just not the case. That's not what's been done through 2 games. I could see that as maybe a scheme that you would drop as a defensive coordinator to stop Florida State, but teams haven't needed to. That is the frustrating part. This is a front from Memphis today that is smallish. They don't deploy a lot of people up front. It's a 3-3-5 by nature. We'll see. Maybe they adjust today and they put 4 guys up there with their hands in the dirt. I would encourage that if I was doing a Memphis pregame show in this scenario. They might deploy a bunch of run blitzes. We'll see how they scheme it up. But generally speaking, those 3 dudes can be moved off the ball. If Troy can do it consistently enough, then for crying out loud, Don't tell me that we're as good or worse than Troy on the offensive line. I know we got to bottom out here and figure out just how bad things are. Tell me it's not that bad. And I think that all starts today. It also will be interesting to see against a nimble, quick, and agile front. This is what a 3-3-5 provides you, is quickness. Do you call long developing runs, or do you go straight ahead?
You got to go straight ahead, Tom. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. I think you got to go straight ahead. It's a good point by you. I got to tell you, I think today Memphis will bring up those backers and turn into a 5-2 real quick. I think they'll kind of have some guys standing around the line of scrimmage to discourage Florida State from doing what you're talking about. I still think you got to do it. You know, your best running teams, your really physical running teams, they really don't care what you're in.
Agreed. Well,
they really don't care.
Let's just say you commit those guys, schematically speaking, you commit those guys on the edge so you have numbers. All right, well, now all I got to do as a running back is beat one of two people.
That is correct.
So you have it's assuming that you run that particular scheme. We'll see how they draw it up today. Also, in some ways, you know, the condensed sets, there's been features on Warchant, and we've talked about that, you know, closer to the line of scrimmage benefits DJ more. That speaks to his skill set from last year at Oregon State a little bit more.
Yes.
But you can make an argument for spreading things out this week, because then it simplifies the assignments for your offensive line to run block and pass pro. And they haven't been. This is something that's happened on both sides of the ball that's just really frustrating. It looks like they've never done the things they're being asked to do on both sides. You're like, man, counters are bread and butter. How are you so confused? Man-to-man coverage, where you might have to switch responsibility, is our bread and butter. We're not 60% zone and 40% man. How do you look like you've never communicated before? These are the basic things that trouble us. And this is how we lose sleep over the week if we're still invested, and we are very invested in this program.
Well, a win today keeps you invested. More importantly, it keeps them invested. I do think it's of vital importance they get a win here. It changes everything. We know that winning is the ultimate deodorant. You got to find ways to win games here and just get a little something moving in the direction of confidence. You get a win here today. I think you're most certainly going to win the following game if you get a win here today, because SMU's look dreadful. They're already pulling their quarterback and already making changes there. They've had a real hard time to start the year. I think you go get that win. Their lines of scrimmage are problematic. You think Memphis can be taken advantage of. I think SMU can be taken advantage of big time. Yeah. Well, the reason I bring all this up is all of a sudden you're 2-2 at that point. And, you know, frankly, I think you beat Cal at home too. Now, I know Cal just beat Auburn. People will point to that. But if you didn't watch that game, then you don't know that Auburn turned it over 5 times and lost by 7. I think if you don't do that, you'll probably beat Cal. And at that point, you're 3-2. And more importantly, you would have won 3 straight. And you'll be hosting a big game against a rival in Clemson. And all of a sudden, you'll be feeling better about yourself. So what I'm doing is carving out a path towards a more successful remaining schedule, right? I mean, the possibility is there. But it begins today, and it's got to be that you come out and play physical, you play smart, and you play fast. You know, I don't want to see the sort of timidity that we've seen so far, this pensive, I'm not sure what I'm doing, as you just described. How is it possible? I think the coaches have simplified everything they can. To your point, for those that have not seen the videos at warchant.com that Tom did with D-Rob, go do yourself a favor and watch it, because right off the bat, you're going to see a veteran of all veterans just completely whiffing in counter. Maurice Smith is your center, and he doesn't touch anybody. I don't really know how that's possible. There are numerous moments where you're left scratching your head that Florida State can't even run their bread and butter plays, the basic plays that Mike Norvell has always hung his hat on from his time at Memphis to here. That strikes me as odd. Defensively, we're largely in man. I'm not understanding how we're confused. It's very strange to me. It's one of the easiest schemes to understand as a player. They understood it last year. Many of these guys are back from last year. So it's puzzling. It's got to be better. I'm a broken record. It's got to be better today.
Well, you know, some of the things that confuse us is motion just before the snap. That's something that Memphis hasn't done through its first 2 games this season. They have to do it today.
It's motion. Everybody runs motion. How the hell can you get – anyhow.
Yeah, I would say that Memphis – here's the interesting part about it, because you'd say Memphis has a 4-year starter, a quarterback. It was a prolific offense last year. They've got a 1,000-yard receiver. Their running back situation looks very good. I'm of the belief that Memphis isn't showing up in Tallahassee and saying we can blow Florida State off the ball the way that Georgia Tech did. Georgia Tech came in arrogant, and they were right to be.
Yeah.
I think Memphis is going to be about eye candy and tricks because they don't think that they can win in a straight up setting. So they're going to try to manipulate the same things that the previous two opponents have, which means that they're going to be tendency breakers. If we were just studying film from the first 2 weeks, we will be fooled a lot. Mike Norvell said they did go back into last year to take a look at some of the things that Memphis runs offensively. You're going to be tested today if you are Florida State's linebackers and safeties and corners in terms of pre-snap responsibilities. You're right. If I see a guy running from somebody else's half of the field to my half of the field, my thought should be, hey, I probably have an assignment change. Damn, because we're not thinking that right now. Not consistently enough.
Tom, it's just so ridiculous.
It's a rail route. It's a flare. Whatever the hell you want to call it. Like one of them where they score the touchdown, Boston College, the touchdown to Trayshawn Ward. I'm looking at that play. That might be a quarterback run that's called. I'm not even sure that that's option 3. It might be option 5. But Castellanos is snapping the ball and laughing. Going, they're still not covering it as he's letting it go.
Still not covering it.
Stop them from laughing at us. Come on, guys. Communicate.
Yeah, and I know it sounds doom and gloom early here. That's what happens when you're 0-2. But both Tom and I think this is a great opportunity for Florida State to get a win. I think the matchup favors Florida State. It's one of the reasons they're favored, but also I think physically it favors Florida State overwhelmingly so. So we have plenty of time to talk about this. We're at Hotel Indigo. If you're out and about and listening, driving around, whatever it is you're doing, you pulled it up on your phone there on the YouTube. We appreciate that. Swing on by. Say hello. Get yourself a cold cocktail. Let's get ready for some football, buddy.
Build it very spicy. It's very spicy, bloody.
Warchant Game Day continues in a moment.
Hey, this is Jay Green from Hotel Indigo Tallahassee. Can I stop and say thank you? Thank you for telling your guests to stay with us. Thank you for hosting your corporate meetings and social events in our rooftop meeting space. Thank you for hanging out with us on FSU football game days. Believe it or not, this sales guy isn't selling anything. I just want to say thank you. But if you've never seen our rooftop and I can ever help, give us a call, 850-755-9011. We are Hotel Indigo Tallahassee. Welcome to our neighborhood.
We all know home-cooked meals are so much better for you, but in football season, you don't always have the time to pull it off. So with HelloFresh handling all the meal planning, shopping, and most of the prep, it's easier than ever to get dinner on the table quickly and without pain. With summer in the rearview mirror and busier days in our near future or in the now's the perfect time to save time and money when it comes to your dinner routine. Skip the meal planning, skip the grocery store lines, cut down on food waste. HelloFresh, convenient doorstep delivery and pre-measured ingredients are coming your way. You can even easily customize your meal. So if you want to swap out a protein or vegetables, you can do that. Gene Williams knows as well as I do the grind of football season. It's nuts. We work on our shows, articles, videos, podcasts. It's a busy time. You need to take some stress off your plate and put good food on your plate instead. That's where HelloFresh comes in. For free breakfast for life, go to HelloFresh.com/free warchant. One free breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life just by going to HelloFresh.com/free warchant.
Welcome back, Warchant Game Day, as we are at Hotel Indigo. You wouldn't know it if you were watching Warchant Game Day right now on YouTube, Warchant TV. You'd say, you guys look like you're in a radio studio, and earlier you looked like you were in your own homes. That'd be accurate. That is true. We pre-recorded this show so that we could be at Hotel Indigo sharp, 10 o'clock sharp. We wanted to be at Hotel Indigo to meet all of you and say hello. That's where we are right now. If you're listening to this, make your way to Hotel Indigo and enjoy some cold beverages, some tasty food items, and a wonderful atmosphere with the best view of Doak Campbell Stadium and all the land. So come on by. Hopefully you're gearing up to watch Florida State win a football game. They have yet to win one this year, if you didn't know.
Yeah, that's obviously when we have a noon kick, things are compressed in the mornings. You don't have enough or as much time to work with. But the next week with the 7 o'clock kick for Cal, we'll be with you early and probably live on Saturday morning before we see you at Indigo much, much later in the day. So hopefully that view looks okay from inside the stadium. As we get closer to kickoff, I waver a little bit, but I go back to my eyes are telling me, because there's evidence of what this team is. You know, BC played their first game with us. Georgia Tech played its first game with us. That trench on either side is for the taking. Please, guys. I hate that I have to come here and say, do you care to? But I'm here asking, do you care to? Because if they do, you got a chance for a win today. A good one.
I forgot Brock Glenn, by the way, is from Memphis, was a star there in the city of Memphis in his high school days, Tom. Don't know if we'll see him today. We've gotten that question a lot during the week on the Jeff Cameron Show, weekdays 1 to 4 on 93.3 Real Talk Radio and Warchant TV. But I don't suspect that will happen unless DJ gets off to a very slow start yet again. If that were to happen, maybe we do see some Brock Glenn. The better storyline has really been about these two men who are facing each other as head coaches. And Silverfield said, hey, look, this game is not about me versus Mike Norvell, but there is a ton of familiarity. This is the storyline. These two gentlemen are really close friends. To the point where, as I alluded to in the first segment of this show, that Mike wanted to bring him down to Tallahassee. He ended up interviewing for the job, did Ryan Silverfield, and got it. And he's done a good job there. That's why Memphis is considered to be one of the group of 5 teams that could make the slate of 12 teams in the postseason. So I wonder if that familiarity will play a role at all with either of these two coaches in this game, in this matchup. You can't know. I don't know, but it would seem silly to think that it wouldn't.
I think, yeah, to a degree. I mean, Silverfield even joked about it. I fully expect to see a trick play on the second drive because that's a very Mike Norvell thing to do. And he said, I know that he listens to the opposing coach's press conferences on his way to the television show that he does. So he says, if you're listening in the car right now, hi.
How great is that?
How you doing? It reminds me of what Kenny Dillingham would say about Mike Norvell, how they know each other very, very well. And you're right, they count each other as friends. The one thing I would say is just the way these two offenses, the talent at quarterback, and then the way that they line up and they play are very different, at least through 2 weeks. You know, you can rely on a 4-year starter in Seth Hennigan if you are Silverfield. And that kid hardly puts the ball in danger.
Right.
In some of the numbers I was crunching this week, last year he had the 6th most dropbacks in college football. 6th most. And I'd say Power 5 usually, but because it's Memphis, you have to have a wider scope. 527 dropbacks last year. That was tied with Shedeur Sanders for the 6th most in college football. He only threw bad passes in Pro Football Focus parlance, turnover-worthy passes.
Yes.
2.7% of the time. That's top 30 in the country when he was number 6 in dropbacks. So that's a lot of at-bats, and he didn't throw the ball in bad places. This year, against outgun competition, he has yet to throw a bad pass, a dangerous pass. So when you have that, and his completion percentage has gone up steadily over his career into the 60s, mid-60s, upper 60s, you can call very different plays if you're Memphis than what Mike will call for DJ and Florida State. I also think Memphis is at, again, in the trenches, they're at a bit of a disadvantage. So I would expect more tricks from Memphis and more straight ahead from Florida State. That they know each other's tendencies might help to a degree, but I think the way that these two teams are comprised right now, composed of the pieces they are, I think they're going to be different. So it might not come into play.
I do think it's interesting if you go back and look at, you were citing some numbers from Pro Football Focus, and you go back and look at the way that Georgia Tech and Boston College beat the Noles. They had mobile quarterbacks, and it came into play in the Georgia Tech game. Certainly, we saw Haynes King really hurt Florida State there. But all in all, this was about beating Florida State with the run game. The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets and Boston College averaged, I think I saw the number, let me pull this up really quickly, forgive me, 44 runs in their 2 wins. They averaged 44 runs in their 2 wins. Yep. And, listen, that's Haynes King did more of the damage. The last drive for BC was Thomas Castellanos making some plays with his legs. Those 2 quarterbacks averaged combined in each of those games nearly 70 yards for each of them on the ground. Right. Well, I don't think you have that to worry about with Seth Hennigan. This is suited for Florida State. It really is, as you've said before.
Yeah, so Hennigan is functionally mobile, and they will call his number. Like, it's not just scrambles. They will call his number to run at times. Mostly it's in the red zone. You see a lot more of it in red zone or in like a 3rd and 4.
Right.
That's what they called against Troy. I think it was a 3rd and 4 situation where it's a design quarterback run up the middle. They spread them out and they run. But that's not how they want to live. Now, the question is, how do they generate their running game? Because their best 2 playmakers, to me, I know they have a 1,000-yard receiver from last year, are Anderson and DeWosier, the 2 running backs. Very physical players. Anderson can run away from you. but Anderson is also very good at manipulating people. Like, it's a skill that Dalvin Cook had. When you throw an example out there, you say, I'm not comparing him. I'm just saying the skill Dalvin had was he'd be behind the right guard and the right tackle, and he would be manipulating the safety by the angles he took with the run and those steps he was taking. So he knew he'd get the corner because he could manipulate. Anderson does some of those things pretty well, but he's got to be able to get going to get up to top speed, and you would like to think you're going to live a little bit in their backfield. So how do they get their running backs the ability to get up to speed and run tough? I would imagine the motions, that's going to be a big part of it. Jet motions, read options, little things like that. That's how they want to get their running game going. But you don't have to honor the quarterback run as much, because if he takes off, it's a gain of 7 versus a gain of 60 if it's Castellanos.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, for those that think, well, that Anderson name sounds familiar, Mario Anderson is his name. He transferred in from South Carolina, and he had huge shoes to fill, because we all remember Blake Watson. That's who you were alluding to with the 1,100-yard season. That's I mean, he's a good player. If you're recruited to play running back in the SEC, you've got talent.
No, he does. He's 5'9", 200 pounds. And I was talking about Rock Taylor, their 1,000-yard receiver who's back. But still, this is a player that he's 5'9", 205. So he looks like he's a muscle hamster type, but he's athletic. He leapt over a safety last week for Troy in a one-on-one situation. He's explosive to the edge. Again, he manipulates the way he runs, manipulates defenders with the way he runs, because he's more patient in the beginning than explosive. But then also DeWosier is a little taller and leaner, but he's got that James Wilder ability to him where he can, continue for an extra 3 or 4 yards if you're not willing to bring him to the ground. If you are, he'll go down. But if you're not, or you're giving the minimal amount of effort, things that we're looking for today, red flags, then a gain of 4 turns into a gain of 7 because you didn't have the heart to bring a guy to the ground.
Yeah, and you would argue for Memphis that this will be the hardest they play almost all season long, correct, given that a college football playoff berth may very well be on the line. I mean, this is a group of 5 team that fancies that playoff spot, thinks that they can get it. They need to get a win like this. Even if Florida State's record at the end of the year is not impressive, it's a nice Power 4 win for a team like Memphis if they're trying to get – listen – if you look at SP+, Memphis's offense, and again, I got you, man, the 2 opponents really kind of make this slanted a little bit, but they are really efficient. They're the number 10 most efficient offense in the country as we come into this game in week 3. Now, listen, I know when you're playing outmanned opponents, it's easy to look good, but Florida State was playing 2 outmanned opponents and looked terrible. Nothing about their offense looked good. It's all relative. Florida State has better players than Boston College, a lot better players than Boston College, and they didn't look efficient in the slightest. At least Memphis has looked efficient through 2 games, enough to be SP Plus's top 10 team in the country.
Well, and that's a quarterback who knows every bit of the offense that he's running. He's fully comfortable with it. Hennigan is an anticipatory thrower. He does have the ability to throw the ball 40 or 50 yards down the field, but it usually has a little bit of altitude underneath it in order to get there.
Yeah.
They were playing, they've seen a lot of off coverage so far. We should not be in that situation where we're playing off, where you need to come up, play press man, be physical. I think a lot of the stuff that they're going to do is geared towards winning a series of downs with 4 downs. Maybe they're able to run the ball, and maybe the basics work because we're not invested. And I hate that I have to keep on bringing that up as a potential possibility, that maybe we're not invested. I think we will be, but it's a lot of underneath stuff with their H-backs. This is where Mike and he are very similar. The things that we want to do, where somehow the tight end's wide open. Now, he's dropped it a lot this year, but somehow the tight end's wide open a lot in this offense for Mike. Same thing for Silverfield. Manipulating second-level defenders that way with weird formations, backfield alignments, things like that. I would assume that Memphis, if they're going to be jacked up for this game and they need the political points of a win over Florida State in Tallahassee, you're going to see tricks, irregular formations. You're going to see going for broke on 4th and short. You're going to see a group that wants to shorten the game. Once again, fewer possessions because of the trench differential. There's a lot of tests that are coming here. And the number one thing is Hennigan, the quarterback, has played against a lot of power opponents over his career. He's not going to be scared of this moment at all.
Memphis has the 19th most wins in the last 10 years in college football. Did you know that? They were top 20 total win team over the last 10 years. They win a lot of games. They're used to winning, is my point. There's a culture of winning that was helped propagated by Mike Norvell. It is carried on by one of his former assistants. It's something. This is a program that believes they'll come in and win this game.
Yeah, so much so that Mike Norvell's former Memphis players, when he was going through it at 0-4, were tweeting out towards Florida State players, "Hey guys, hang in there. Our dude's the truth. He builds that culture." And now it's almost like Mike's former players have to reach out to Mike's current players at Florida State. "Hey guys, hold down the fort."
It's so strange to me. This is unlike anything we've seen. I'm really hanging my hat on the fact that there could very well be a seismic shift happening in college football that's leading to very strange results year over year. There's a working theory I have that is going to happen more often, that the old way of viewing programs coming into seasons with so much carryover from year to year is a bygone era. And because we're seeing so much roster upheaval and ability to transfer year over year, you can no longer project in the same manner you once did about a buildup for a program about to enter into a certain stage. Those stages are coming and going very quickly.
Unless you are in that club that was always going to go to the playoff in whatever system, like a Georgia or Ohio State.
Yeah, Georgia has stockpiled athletes 3 deep at every position, and they're all 4- and 5-star kids. So you can withstand transfers like Jermaine Johnson. Jermaine Johnson leaves Georgia where he's not producing a ton. He plays, but he's not dominating. Well, yeah, guess why he left? Georgia had the number 1 draft pick, the defensive end. I mean, that's you. What are you going to do, right? Okay, so Jermaine left, and he came here, and he was great, and he got drafted in the first round. That's an abundance of riches for a program like Georgia. Florida State's not at that level right now. Not many programs, maybe no program, is at that level right now that Georgia's at. And until you get there, you're not safe from these seismic shifts in results. I think you're going to see teams like, don't be surprised if Michigan fools around and loses 4 or 5 games this year, fresh off a win in the Invitational. That,
right.
There was a time.
Vegas put him at 9.5, I think.
Well, I'll just tell you this. There was a time that the defending national champion, or in this case, the invitational champion, would never be projected to have a fall off of 4 to 5 games the following year.
Yeah.
That's a modern era problem for programs.
Yeah. The problem with us, and the reason why people are frustrated, is amped up expectations through veteran players that were brought in at quarterback and everywhere you look on the defense. And the biggest frustration with all of that, and that's got nothing to do with expectations and noise from the outside. That's, you are signaling bringing in the 17 players that you did that you believe you can compete right here, right now. And now you're 0 in the conference. Like, you're sitting on an 0 in the conference.
Well, okay, so the other part of that, Tom, is I want to make sure that people understand me. I'm saying that it won't be weird to see crazy results year over year in college football in ways that we didn't before, but that does not in any way excuse the fact that Florida State lost as huge favorites to the likes of Boston College and Georgia Tech, to your point. That should not happen.
It should not. And the biggest thing is, with the amount of veterans you have and guys who know the system, like I'm talking about Hennigan knowing the system at Memphis. Like,
right.
If DJ has some bumps, you would understand. This is like the 4th playbook that he's learned, or might be 3rd in his college career. All very different from one another.
Right.
But Darius Washington knows his assignments. Maurice Smith knows what assignments he has.
That is correct.
On defense, Jackson's been here. Farmer's been here forever and a day. DJ Lundy's been here a long time. Azarie Thomas has known nothing in college football but this. Shaheem Brown has known nothing in college football but Florida State's defensive scheme. And yet, when they're communicating with each other, it looks like they never played together before. Like, that's the frustrating thing. Patrick Payton has been here forever, and you're seeing him get washed off the ball with ease far too often. And that's where expectations be damned. It's like, you at least need to look like you've prepared.
Yeah.
And we haven't looked like that yet. And that's what we're all yearning for today, is a group that looks like they're playing together. Because the question you could ask is, well, what have they been doing this whole time? And that's a fair question at this point.
Oh, there's the criticisms of this coaching staff, the head coach on down, because of this god-awful start to the season are absolutely legitimate. Everybody's right to be angry about this. This is Florida State University. The expectation here is that you compete to win the conference annually at the very least.
Yeah.
It is now a 12-team playoff. I think that most people would set Florida State's expectations annually somewhere in the neighborhood, if you project it out, 3 out of every 4 years making the playoff.
You need to be in that selection show consideration 3 out of every 4 years,
right.
At a minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is when you're right, when you're operating at peak efficiency, Florida State is a top 5 team in the country. they've obviously won 3 national titles, but we've also seen them have long stretches of time in which they were a fixture in the top 10. So it's not crazy once you watch a program get built back up with the kind of cachet that Florida State has to believe they can sustain a much higher level of play than what we've seen through these 2 games. I just got done saying it may be different than it used to be, and that's true, but it doesn't mean you go from 13-0 to incompetent. This is stunning. These results are stunning.
Yeah, and when you live through something as stunning as this, that leaves you despondent. And look, we talk for a living, but I'm still despondent. I'm speaking out loud, but internally, what? You all at once are dreading the next set of data and craving it because there's nothing that can be done.
That is correct.
Until you define, are you still falling off the mountain? Or have you bottomed out and it's time to begin again? And they're still falling until evidence is provided. And I'm hoping it comes in just a couple hours today. But, man, if they look detached from reality, if they look detached from each other, and there's no coordination again, and guys are freelancing and doing their own thing rather than just sticking to their job and trusting the other 10 guys to do their job, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb in the way of another embarrassing loss. Because that's within the I'm talking about the trenches, and Florida State can win in both trenches this week. I am convinced of that. But if they play like they did, without the fire that they needed against Georgia Tech and Boston College, it happens a 3rd time in a row, you could get smoked today because this team's not going to help you. Memphis is not going to help you.
Correct. Yeah. And I do think that it's imperative that you match the intensity and focus that they'll start this game with. This is a big deal for Memphis. They've circled this. Their fans are excited. Their players are excited. And obviously the head coach is. He told you this week that he was excited to play this game. What an opportunity for Memphis football to take another big step forward. Meanwhile, if you don't match that intensity, you will get boat raced because that's a veteran quarterback who knows what he's doing, and you have got to find ways, obviously, to make them uncomfortable. We haven't made anybody uncomfortable yet. There's nobody who's felt like they've had to deviate in any way, shape, or form from their opening drive game plan. Georgia Tech did whatever they wanted right down the field. Boop, 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 touchdown to match your touchdown. Boston College began the game. You couldn't get them off the field. You were more physical. You were tougher. You bothered to show up now that you were 0-1. But guess what? They converted because you couldn't cover a rail or a wheel, however you want to describe it. Couldn't communicate. And execution matters. So the next thing you knew, you were still on the field. You had a grand total of, 2-3 plays in the first quarter. And all of a sudden, the here we go again mentality starts to creep in. Florida State has to avoid that by being sharp early. So obviously, everybody walking into that stadium this afternoon is going to think to themselves, how are we looking? How are we looking on this first drive? What do we got going here?
And they're thinking, what am I in for today? And that's a tough, that also, when you're at home, has its own feeling in the stands. It has its own atmosphere.
There's a pall that hangs over.
It could be eradicated with a 3-and-out or a stop on the first drive. It could be eradicated with a score on the first drive. That settles everybody the hell down.
Well, imagine you get a stop on the opening drive. You get the ball back. You look like you have a cogent game plan. You execute said game plan and win. You get up 7-0, 14-0. Here we go. Okay, this is the team I thought we were going to be. Instead of, all right, it's 7-0 Memphis, and we look listless. Mike's got a faraway gaze in his eye. Buddy, I don't know that anybody in the stands could be stopped from booing if that happens. And I don't like that. I never like that. I hate booing the home team. I've booed coaches before, and there was a time during the last decade and even there with the short stint that Willie had where booing was necessary.
I remember a night against Georgia Tech in 2009. Yeah. There was when the defense was on the field. There was a little something from you.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that can happen. But I don't like it. It's certainly not good, and it means the program is in a very dark place, and we'll have a very different conversation next week on the JCS and really in all the Warchant outlets.
Is it possible that it's that bad? Are you allowing yourself to believe in that possibility?
It is possible that we've reached an ugly place and that all of a sudden you've got to ask much larger questions than just whether or not you've got good players or good enough players. You're going to start talking about culture. You're going to start talking about the head coach's competency. I never thought that possible. They just went 13-0. They won at one point 19 games in a row. They won 23 in 2 years. How in the world are we going to enter into that conversation?
You know, it occurs to me that, and we love the guys over with the official network, like a lot of the guys that are broadcasters.
Yeah, we're friends with
all those
yeah.
guys. I think this sounds a little bit different than their show they got over there today.
Without question. Yeah, and they really aren't allowed to do this.
Yeah,
I once worked officially for Florida State and did a show statewide in which they asked me no longer to do that show because I had these kinds of conversations.
You're going to hear straining in their voices. You know, like for us, where it's a little less strained other than our emotions are, but this is it. Like, I mean, this feels, it's a watershed moment. Of course it's Memphis. It couldn't have been Tulane.
Set up.
It couldn't have been SMU.
I'm kind of glad we're not playing Tulane.
Well, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know.
For Mike Norvell,
I know.
through line of through lines, you've been here a half a decade. You got screwed in the first year and a half of that half a decade because you couldn't get the machine rolling because the pandemic shut every machine down pretty much except ventilators. All right. Now here we are. It's your old program. Are you better than your old program 5 years out of taking the job? Damn, man. That is, woo.
It's a scary, scary situation. Before we get to Michael Langston, who's going to give you an update on recruiting, it's also taking a hit, but who's here in town and where Florida State's looking to bring in more talent, Michael Langston has all those answers. You're going to hear it at the end of the game day show here that we're doing right now. But I did want to say that some news broke late in the week. If you missed the shows this week or you didn't read what we had on the boards there at warchant.com and Irish Story, Florida State filed a motion on Tuesday for a partial summary judgment in its lawsuit against the ACC. And I'm going to give you a quick summary myself. That could expedite the school's potential departure from the conference. And that's kind of the storyline. Could is the operative word there. It's a development at the very least on that front. We know since that suit began back in December of 2023 that we've constantly been checking in on that. Florida State is asking for a partial summary judgment related to breach of contract and its ACC exit fee, which is more than $140 million. If the judge here in Leon County rules in favor of FSU's request, the school would have more cachet, obviously, to ask the ACC for a reduced exit fee. This is said to perhaps expedite the negotiations.
Yeah, that's the key here is one way or the other, you're speeding up the resolution to the issue. If you're optimistic, you're speeding up the exit. If you're pessimistic, you're speeding up the ACC's ability to wave their, hand in your face and say, nah. And that's what we're going to find out. Like right now, the motion is one thing. Filing is one thing. Setting a date on the books is another. And if there is a date set for a hearing on this petition, this motion for a partial summary judgment, that gives you a window to negotiate a settlement. That speeds it up. You don't get multiple cracks at this. You don't get multiple shots at something like this.
One bite at the apple, baby.
So for Florida State to take this step is at worst really risky, and at best because they believe that they know the answer to the test before they take it, which is they're going to get ruled. This is going to be ruled in their favor. And either way, the ACC is forced to act in this scenario and come to the table, I would think, unless the ACC wants to go the distance here and potentially let Florida State walk away for little to nothing. That is the pressure that's being applied. We talked about this yesterday. It's so funny.
Mm-hmm.
It has been up to the ACC until this week to decide what the number was or when they wanted to talk about the number. Like, realistically speaking, up against maybe 2027, they could just, pick up the phone at any time and say 300 million, 450 million. But it was on them that you needed to get them to move. Florida State just took a step to help force the ACC to move.
Yeah, I'll take it a step further. Florida State is of the belief by filing this, in my opinion, that they have the kill shot. This is it. They believe it. They're wielding the hammer, and they want the ACC to respond, and here we go. This gets juicy now, Tom. This gets juicy now. We've been waiting and waiting for a moment where we could say, ooh, we may have something here, boys. I think they do. Now, I don't know that they're going to win this. I don't know it's going to work out in their favor. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do think that Florida State thinks they've got the goods.
Well, and according to legal minds we've spoken to outside of this whole situation, two different legal minds, different states, different
states, yep.
But the mind of a lawyer says you don't even try this.
Correct.
You don't. This is not a risk that you take. You take this. It's a gimme, is your thought. It's a gimme. So, okay. we'll see if that holds true.
Late yesterday, Tom, and I know we got to go break. I received a note from said lawyer. We both, Tom and I, don't want to pretend to be lawyers on air, so we ask actual lawyers.
We outsource information of which we don't know.
Right?
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Said, I'm reading a quote now. If you guys are watching this, I'm looking at my phone because this was a text I got late yesterday. I suspect by reading this motion, FSU is holding back some. Good litigators don't empty the tank on the initial motion because the other side gets to respond, and then you get the final word in what is called a reply brief. So smart litigators will try and tee up something juicy for the reply so the other side doesn't get a chance to respond to it until the hearing. So that's interesting to take a look at that. He goes, as Tom's lawyer mentioned, he's referencing the other lawyer in this discussion, until it's set for hearing, it's more waiting and negotiating. I don't think it's a negotiation tactic per se, but it will definitely keep everybody talking for now. I'm wondering if they're going to schedule a hearing just before ESPN's deadline to try to scare them into opting in through the 2036.
Well, we would want to scare the ACC. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
The whole point is you're filing all of these motions, and this gets into areas where a lawyer would need to interpret my thought, and say idiot or that's a good thought. Florida State is contending here that 2027 and 2036 are irrelevant because they're not a guarantee.
Right.
And to me, that makes a lot of sense. If I have to pay to leave, and you're saying that, well, it's till 2036, so calculate the value out times, 12 years. I'd say 12 years, my ass. It's 2027. I don't know. You don't know. You can't tell me with a straight face that they've opted in. So why am I on the hook for an extra 9 years that you may or may not get a yes to?
They also, by the way, the issues being challenged, Tom, are whether or not the grant of right covers Florida State University home games, by the way.
Which is what you heard in the appeal this week in Leon County. There was an appeals hearing.
That's right.
In which they said Florida sovereign property is being negotiated and being litigated in the state of North Carolina. You cannot have a court in North Carolina, that concurrent lawsuit, rule on Florida sovereign property. So they're aligned here, but
laws in the ACC Constitution is even enforceable.
The very basics.
So very specific. Yes.
This ain't worth the ink. It's printed on this piece of paper.
That's what they're saying. Hey, it's been fun. We're going to get Michael Langston in here before we sign off for the day, but make sure you stick around for more Warchant Game Day. He's Tom Wang. I'm Jeff Cameron. Go Noles.
Welcome into the Warchant Gameday Pregame Show. Do not adjust your dial. We had to call an audible here because we've got some breaking injury news, as you see at the bottom of your screen there. Safety Shaheem Brown, unavailable for the game against Memphis. Also out are tackle Jeremiah Byers, linebacker Sean Murphy, and Omar Graham. Tom, what's your thoughts on the news? Obviously, losing Shaheem hurts.
Yeah, it does. And to clarify here, just for the sake of how Florida State reports things, officially they're confirming that Shaheem Brown is unavailable for today's game. That's the way that they word these things language-wise. We assume it's got to be an injury at this point. This is not an anticipated announcement, but Florida State did release it to the media recently, and now obviously we are confirming that report just before 10 a.m. So this is a huge blow to Florida State defensively. For obvious reasons, because Shaheem Brown's one of their better back seven defenders, period. But also, if you look at some of the reporting and the film breakdowns that we've done in the last week with Dominic Robinson, Shaheem Brown's a coordinator back there. Whether or not he has a green dot for communication with the sidelines, Ben, this is somebody who gets everybody organized and is one of the few over communicators on the defense on a day where the communication is going to be tested again against an opponent that throws the ball more than Florida State's first two opponents. Not having Shaheem Brown is big news and unexpected news until recently. Did not see that coming this week, if people can take to my meaning. The news about Jeremiah Byers was anticipated at this point, and Sean Murphy and Omar Graham have been out. Graham since game one and Sean Murphy all season. So those two notes aren't terribly unexpected, but this is a big deal for Florida State to be missing one of its leaders and best players on defense.
Where do they turn? I know secondary is a position with a lot of depth, but safety, where do they kind of look, do you think, from here for this game?
It's going to be tough because, again, communication issues have been present at that position, especially when Conrad Hussey's on the field. He's a redshirt freshman, so he's getting used to the scheme in terms of live game speed. Devontae Brown was originally a starter at safety before the season. Now, these aren't the same positions that Shyheim plays. He's more around the box and around the line of scrimmage than in center field, but you're going to have to shuffle a little bit here. Options could be Amarian Cooper. KJ Kirkland could be an option there. Maybe Kevin Noles is playing nickel and Earl Little can slide back there. They do cross train a bunch in the secondary, but I don't know which direction that they're going to go here. Again, this is more of a passing opponent. You know, if you were facing a Boston College or a Georgia Tech in this circumstance, I think you would bring one of your run stuffing safeties in there, but you almost need a coordinator to make sure everybody is where they need to be. Again, we'll see where Florida State goes. There is one bit of good news that we can share, and this was anticipated as well, and we talked about it all week here on Warchant TV. But receiver Hakeem Williams is going to be back in the fold today for Florida State offensively. That's good news for one side of the ball. But generally, Ben, I mean, they've got some options for names, but impact-wise, it would be pretty surprising if the replacement for Shyheim Brown has an impact on the game like Shyheim does, especially before the snap when it comes to communication.
It'll be interesting to see where FSU turns with Shyheim Brown unavailable for the game against Memphis, and tackle Jeremiah Byers and linebacker Sean Murphy and Omar Graham also out. We had to fill you in with this breaking injury news update. We go back to the Warchant Game Day pregame show now.
Hey, this is Jay Green from Hotel Indigo Tallahassee. Can I stop and say thank you? Thank you for telling your guests to stay with us. Thank you for hosting your corporate meetings and social events in our rooftop meeting space. Thank you for hanging out with us on FSU football game days. Believe it or not, this sales guy isn't selling anything. I just want to say thank you. But if you've never seen our rooftop and I can ever help, give us a call, 850-755-9011. We are Hotel Indigo Tallahassee. Welcome to our...
Sometimes the questions are tough because the season's tough. You know, when you're 0-2, Michael Langston's here to talk about recruiting for us here on Warchant TV. When you're 0-2, it's not a whole lot of, hey, Michael, can we be a top 5 class right now? What pieces do you need to be a top 5 class? But Michael's never afraid to face that kind of heat, those tough questions about where Florida State stands. And that's why we're here today on Warchant TV to talk about specifically a couple of questions that, Michael, were awesome. They were all very, very good. If you want to brag on the folks for the mailbag, you've done that when we were on the Smash. But we had 20 questions, somewhere between those two numbers. Outstanding work by the people of Warchant.com subscribers wanting to know the latest on Florida State recruiting.
Yeah, it's really great. We spent a whole week letting people kind of get it together of what they wanted to ask, and there was some really good ones, and there was some direct stuff of, you know, whether the problems or, you know, what they can do, or even what I would do, you know, in that place. And so I can't thank people enough of the questions. I think it was phenomenal. People had some really good stuff, and it's probably not easy. We talk about me answering it, but it's probably not easy for a lot of these people asking these questions of, you know, stuff that bothers them, but or stuff that's maybe encouraging. So I appreciate everyone. I think we had around 30.
Oh, wow.
You know, 30 questions in general. Like it went to 2 pages, so it's really good. The feedback was really good, and you know, certainly I'm excited about, you know, just, you know, maybe elaborating on you know, some of the questions that we have, a few of them, and then the rest I think people can go see. But I think it's a really good job, great job, members. We appreciate everything you guys do.
Clearly, I didn't count properly, but I did like a few of these specifically.
Yeah.
And I'd love for Michael to be able to share it with everybody here on Warchant TV. If you're interested in these answers and more, remember, again, warchant.com, on the premium recruiting board, we have all of these mailbag questions. First, from North Carolina, Noel. Michael, he asked, even with a poor season or a poor start to his season, how impactful would it be to get good recruiters on staff to help 2025 cycle specifically? So what do you think about that question? That's a big, broad one.
Yeah, it's a big, broad one, and it's a really good one. I think it would help them. Certainly, you see some places where, you know, they could use, you know, a little more, you know, push and excitement as far as adding more guys. There's no need to go into. I know everyone asks me like, "Hey, what coach?" And it's like it's not necessary with that. It's just they could use some more, you know, maybe 1 or 2, you know, big time additions that would really help them. I think certainly would help them. Anytime you add new coaches there's an excitement level with the fan base, or just excitement level with recruits in general. They get excited, especially if there's somebody they know. That's a broad person where they have really good ties to the state of Florida or the Georgia or areas that FSU heavily recruits. I think it certainly makes a big impact. There's no doubt.
So let me follow up on that really quickly, because Michael, in the era of NIL, a lot of teams are offering a lot of packages, and everybody's looking at each other's pockets. Like, even within the locker room, I feel like that happens, which is a problem for coaches to deal with.
Yeah.
But then fans of a program like Florida State are saying, well, what about Miami's NIL game or Ohio State's NIL game? How much do we have relative to them? Well, my question is about recruiters. It used to be that maybe you had some guys that had covert ops in a football program to help get things done.
Right.
But relationships mattered a ton before NIL. Now that NIL is here, recruiters on staff, that still has value. Yeah?
Yeah, it does. And I always say this, it's like, does your staff, you can have great teachers and great developers and all that stuff, but what does the message resonate? How does it resonate to how they accept coaching? And that goes to high school too. When kids connect with somebody that's maybe maybe a little bit younger, or maybe somebody that has a little more excitement around them, they're going to respond quicker and better. And that's just reality. That doesn't mean somebody's bad or terrible. It just means that's we see that with Patrick Surtain. When you watch Patrick Surtain coach, to resonate both in recruiting and in his development of what he does, I think really stands out. So that's kind of what I think. If you're adding guys, that's the kind of guy typically that you would want. And we know Patrick's done really good as a recruiter. I think really good personally as a developer. We haven't seen a lot of that because a lot of teams haven't really attacked, I think, their corners or DBs heavily. But overall, I think the development's been good. So that's kind of what you're looking for. I think a type of guy like that. If there is some changes, I think that's the kind you want, where it's a combination of Patrick's played at every level, college, pro, development, but also excitement, but that's also how the kids respond to him as far as you know showing that product of what they have and development. So I think that's kind of a key.
Warrant asks, hopefully I got the name right, subscriber Warrant. Is there any hope FSU gets any more elite recruits in the 2025 cycle, or is it time to pivot and hope we kill it in the portal?
I don't think you're to the point where you need to pivot. I think they're just in stationary mode right now because of the record and the product of what they've shown so far. I don't think you have to. Now, doesn't mean you don't start developing relationships. And segue our list this weekend, I think there's a few guys in there that are certainly how you're regarded, but maybe not guys that FSU has pushed for. So I think you develop relationships with those guys, but then you decide you later, if it's necessary, that you have to push. I think Matt Nasser did a story on a defensive end that they offered that certainly has nice pedigree as far as other offers, and one that they probably liked, and maybe one that with Javion Hillison doing what he did, decommitting, I think kind of seeing where you stand with that, and then kind of go from there. But I don't think you're to the point where you just say, forget, you're not going to get any elite recruits. I think there's a possibility they can, but obviously that depends on how the product does, and then I can kind of address kind of where they stand with top guys or guys that the board, because it's hard to break down the board when you're 0-2 and two games. You haven't looked really that great when you watch it, so it's hard to decipher and say, well, they'll do this or do that. I mean, there's guys like Byron Lewis that I feel they're very heavily involved with. There's several other guys that they've been involved with that, but really we have to see the product before I can really just break it down of what they are and what they're going to do, because I don't think we know yet. Like I said, it's kind of in a stationary position until we see a little more normalcy with that product.
Noel Doubt wants to know, is it worth it for Florida State to continue to head to the portal for bringing quarterbacks in? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. Probably one of my favorites when I looked at it, because it's a really intriguing question, right? Because outside of Jordan Travis, who we don't really view as a transfer because he was there for like 4 years and he's a diehard Nole, he was invested. He really wanted to go there in the first place. That's the only one that's really worked out. You look at Everett Golson, Kenzie Milton, and now the small sample of DJU. I just think for me, and it's just my perspective, I think other positions you can go at, but I think when you have a room that has like Brock Glenn, and Luke Cromhoke, and you're going to have Tramel Jones, and you already have Trevor Jackson kid. I think sometimes you don't have to swing that big. I don't see it the advantage because the thing with the quarterback is it affects everybody. It's not like, and it's like I know a lot of people look at it like affects everybody. It's that he doesn't play defense, but the defense it affects them as far as just the confidence and the way they play. And in the offense, we certainly know it affects everyone because the quarterback's the one guy that always touches the ball and he's always involved. And he's got to get the playmakers involved. He's got to get other playmakers involved, and that's hard to do if you're bringing in a new guy that doesn't really have a relationship with a lot of these guys. Compared to say a Brock Glenn who's been in the system for like 2 or 3 years, you're going to trust that guy a little bit more if you're on the team. So it's harder to build that trust. And then if it's a quiet guy, like kind of what we're seeing so far with DJU, that's a tougher challenge of, doing that. So for me, that's the one position I would not push for as far as the portal. I would kind of understand and stick, unless the only reason I say that you wouldn't do that is if you don't have a set guy that you feel like, hey, this guy can take us where we need to go. We don't have enough talent, kind of like the Miami situation or even the Nebraska situation. Even though that wasn't a transfer, just the kind of type of talent like that. If you don't have the good guys in there to work with, then I get the transfer portal for quarterback. But if you have guys that are already there, I think better solutions probably develop those guys, stick with those guys, because it's such a big swing when it affects so many players on the team when you're talking about quarterback.
Yeah, Nebraska wasn't a transfer, but they clearly depleted all assets that they possibly could to bring in the quarterback to flip that program. Obviously, they got their first primetime win over Colorado, no pun intended there. But it looks like the buzz is continuing for that program. So, Michael, before we wrap today, the Memphis visit weekend for Florida State, official visitors on campus or visitors in general making their way to Tallahassee, is not nothing. The full list is available on the premium recruiting board at warchant.com. Subscribe to warchant.com. You're going to get all this information from top to bottom. But just want to get your closing thoughts on an overview of what to expect this weekend and maybe some of the big wigs that are on campus.
Yeah, I'll say this: if the guys that show up are what is expected, based on what I'm hearing of guys expect, now we're going to confirm all these for ourselves to make sure that. And see if the prospect will convert. But they get what we have on that list. I think that's you should be pretty excited based on where the first 2 games have looked. So I think it's a big deal. I think you have Malik Clark on there, 4-star wide receiver that's committed to FSU. Peyton Joseph, another 4-star that's committed to FSU, offensive lineman, to be there. And then you have a few targets. I think the big one. TJ Alford, 4-star linebacker. He's officially visiting FSU. He might already be at FSU because I think he had a game last night. So I think he should be here, either here now or will be soon. So I think those are some of the few that certainly jump out to you. And then I guess the biggest surprise when I saw as far as finding out expected was Duke Johnson, a 4-star DB, is committed to Alabama. He is expected to be there, but he's always had high interest in FSU. So pretty good group of guys, and there's some more in there that I didn't even include. I'm just throwing a few out there, but definitely a really good list. If those guys show up, certainly have a chance to make a really strong impression. Hopefully, for their sake, the first win to kind of get some buzz created. But certainly with that list and or expected guys are coming, that still tells you there's a lot of people that still believe in Mike fixing it and shifting this and getting us into a good direction as far as what the FSU football that most are used to. So I think there's still people that, and most recruits all believe in that Mike can do this, and I think a lot of that's because of he's done this before. He's fixed it before where he had the takeover apart where things weren't good. But I think the big difference with that on this team is just there's a lot more talent that he has to work with, and you just have to find the right combinations that work.
Find a way to win. It impacts everything. It impacts Michael's job, and it impacts the team side job for the stuff that we have coming up this weekend on Warchant TV. Find a way to not be 0-3. That's a simple thing to ask, right? Florida State will have all the coverage for you on warchant.com, head to toe. Premium recruiting board. Michael has all of it. And if you missed out on this mailbag and you're a subscriber to warchant.com, be on the lookout. This isn't the last one of the season, everybody. And if you're interested in becoming a subscriber to warchant.com, remember, you heard 3 questions today, upwards of 30 on the PRB. So much more content available on our website. We hope you can support us over there. If you are a happenstance and happen buyer here for the channel, give us the thumbs up underneath the video, subscribe to the channel.